Welcome to the No Pants Show. I'm Susan Rook-Diattore, and we are joined today with Will Reynolds, Seer Interactive's CEO, founder, currently director of digital strategy, one of the world's leading experts on search, SEO, digital marketing, the marketing industry in general, and by all accounts, a moral leader as well. Will, thank you for joining us.
It is my pleasure to join you.
So we were talking just a little bit before we actually started, and I was telling you about the No Pants project open community, 18,000 freelancers in various stages. You are fantastic at giving the real story.
I try.
Right? So freelancing, to the people that are looking at you and saying, oh, he runs $40 million company now, 100 employees from coast to coast. He started in his living room. I'm going to get there too tomorrow. What do you say to them?
I say, one, it's probably never going to happen. So be honest with yourself. That's probably, I don't want to be somebody's inspiration story, because my story is very easily one of, look at this guy. You know, he was just passionate about what he did, and he started off as a high school teacher, and like, look at what he's built. And we're 200 people, 20 something million. And like, but see, the differences between me and most people that say they want this is I never wanted this. So therefore, I never put pressure on myself to have this, because when I started the company, I would tell the team that we weren't going to get over 10 people. Because I never wanted some big old company. So I also haven't had the pressure on myself. So every day, this is a surprise for me that we've gotten to where we've gotten to, not an expectation, which means I think I kind of savor the moment a bit, because I never said that's where I want to be.
Now, that's interesting. So how did you end up this big?
An advisor helped me to uncover and unpack why I kept growing past my number of 10. And what he said to me is, he goes, how would you feel next year if you grew by like 30%, let's just say? And at that time, most years we were growing like 60, 70, 80, 100%. And I was like, oh, that would feel like we were failing. And he's like, you're a growth guy. He's like, because I'm not money motivated. At all. So, I mean, I went to school to be a high school teacher. So like right there, like this wasn't about money. So it took me years, because people would ask me like, how big do you want to be? You know, what's your exit strategy? And I just remember telling people, like, it was always so frustrating for me to get those questions, because I was like, I don't know. And my answer used to be, I want to wake up tomorrow and love what I do and the people I get to do it with and for. That's what I hope for tomorrow. And if I create some 5-year goal for myself, but all those days leading up to that 5-year goal, I'm not living out that reality, then what am I setting that goal for, right? It's like, I want to enjoy every day that I have to do this work with these people. Now, of course, some days are more enjoyable than others, but all in all, I just try to enjoy every day. However, what I have learned is that I get really excited about creating the soil that allows people to grow. And like that to me is the most exciting and awesome part of my job. Is I have a feeling that when people come to Seer, we give them a more fertile soil to grow in than a lot of other companies might. And to watch people take that and run with that and go deeper than anything I ever could have imagined for them, that gives me a lot of satisfaction.
If I were 30 years younger and not married with a husband that has a day-to-day job in Rochester, I would move to Philly tomorrow and apply for one of those internship jobs.
Hire
I
remote.
would get it too. I would count
That's awesome. It's just fun for me. I mean, you know, there's something about impact. Like there's something about knowing that, not that you change somebody's life, because I think that's, but that you altered the trajectory just even a little bit, right? Or you sped it up a little bit. To me, that is just so fulfilling. to feel like we have helped to alter the trajectory of some people's lives in major ways and some people in small, minor ways.
And you never know how the small minor way might play out in a major way later on.
Well, I already do know. And the crazy thing for me is we have gotten into some of the world's biggest companies that other people have whole sales teams trying to get into just based on the fact that our alumni went there, saw a problem and went, oh no, I worked at Sear. Like I'm telling you, those guys are exactly who you think they are. So I have seen some companies that I never would have ever dreamed that we ever might have even had a chance to work with come to us and just hit our lead form. They find us. And to see some of those companies hit our lead form and find us and us not trying to go get them off of the relationship that we've continued with our alumni after they leave says a lot.
That's absolutely right. So let's talk a little bit about relationships, planting the seeds. I love that. Got to ask you about Covenant House.
Yeah.
Talk to us, because I think when you have money, it's easy to give money. It is harder to give time, but it is extraordinary to be willing to sleep out. Talk about that.
Well, in order to talk about that a little bit, it comes back to what we were saying before we started broadcasting, and it's your team is looking at you consistently to see if you're really living out the rah-rah value stuff that you talk about. So when I tell people that, this company was founded on me volunteering somewhere, and that's why I quit my old job and started SEER, in part was because my boss wouldn't let me volunteer at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. People are like, okay, well, that's how we got started. How far have we gotten away from those roots? How far has Will gotten away from that from 15 years ago when he was volunteering with sick kids in the hospital, now that he's busy and flying all over the world and has all these clients and whatnot? And for my team members to see that, no, I'm going to get to the sleep out for cities and homes, try to raise a bunch of money, sleep outside in a box on a snowy, wet night, and then get up tomorrow and come back into work. They're like, oh no, like that's not a thing we just put on the website to help people think we have a volunteer culture. Our CEO is literally sleeping outside tonight to try to raise awareness and money for homeless kids in our city. So I think it allows my team members to be like, that is real. This isn't some rah-rah, feel-good stuff. It's that my CEO day to day is willing to put the time in.
Let's talk a little bit about service and action. You are adamant about taking actions in service of, whether it's the kids in Philadelphia, whether it's your employees, whether it's your customers. I want you to talk a little bit about how people are using SEO and Google and just confusing this whole service thing. And in the search for, I'm going to find the best keywords and I'm going to write clickbait headlines and blah, blah, blah. And you are one of the first people and one of the few people that's really turning that conversation upside down and saying, no, don't do that.
Well, honestly, I look at the work that I used to do in SEO when I first started in 99, and then what I did for up until about 2007. And it was all about chasing down Google. How many times did I have to mention the word on the page? How many links did I need? How much page rank did they need to have? And then I took a step back, and if that is what you wake up for, okay, so I get up in the morning to get 10 links to put more words on this page, you never stop and ask yourself, is this page helping the person who did the search? And then you have to actually stop and say to yourself, well, I do 100 searches a day where I'm hoping to find an answer to everything from a good recipe to cook my wife so that she's like, wow, your skills are amazing. Whatever it is, right? That's when I type in XYZ recipe, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that couple of minutes that after the kids go to bed, I can get something cooked and have it be something other than just ordering takeout for me and my wife, right? And that little bit of time that we have before we have to go to bed and do it all over again. And it's like, you start trying to understand, what is it? What's the motivation behind this search? What would be a great answer for this person? What would help them find their solution? And I think that when that's your end state, instead of how many times do I have to put the word on the page, how many links do I need? How much page rank do I need? You end up in a different place, because if you get the 10 links, you think your job is done. Whereas if I get the 10 links, but the content isn't actually helping people solve a problem, I feel that I still have got work to do. Just because you're number one doesn't mean you did anything to help that customer, or that person seeking out an answer. There's a lot of bad number one rankings. We all know that. And I feel like you got to be careful of putting out in the world something that you don't want to receive. So I want great answers when I'm stuck trying to find out what is this illness that my kid has, or what day is Valentine's Day, or what are great ideas for something. Like when I'm searching that stuff, I don't want a bunch of pop-ups. I don't want a bunch of that stuff. I don't want bad content. I don't want clickbait. But yet, if I'm willing to do that to grow my business, then I'm putting out in the world something that I ultimately don't want myself. So that's why we fight really hard to try to help our clients to follow that path with us.
How does a new freelancer begin to, one, explain that to a client, and two, figure that out for themselves?
On the search side, you mean?
On the search side, or say it's a one-person shop. They're creating content. Maybe it's digital strategy, maybe it's Facebook ads, maybe it's blog posts, maybe it's copywriting. How do they communicate that to a probably small business client who the only thing that they've heard is, no, I want my page to rank? And maybe the freelancer is also saying that. I want my page to rank because I'll look better.
Ooh, okay, a couple things. Okay, two things. Let me make sure I don't forget them. The first one is when I was small, we were able to rank for Philadelphia SEO and all these words. And the most interesting thing is that most of the people searching for services on the web, like web designers, social media consultants and whatnot, they're searching that because they have no network. And if you have no network, it means you're probably not a very savvy client, because usually you'd have somebody to turn to. Who do you recommend? If your first go-to is, hey, I need an SEO consultant, I'm just going to type SEO consultant into Google. It's like, wow. Like, so you're just going to click on whoever's first, second, or third and turn your business over to them. That's your baby. So what we found is that those leads were the worst leads. The people who searched Google, no bullshit, and found us were the worst leads. They were the smallest business. They were the least educated about the value that we could provide, because they were just like, hey, I just searched SEO company. Who shows up first? Now, it was good for the ego, because what we could do is we could say, hey, we're an SEO company. We're outranking other SEOs. And that was nice to say, but like that wasn't, it was taking care of our clients is what got us in this position. So for me, my biggest piece of advice to anybody is a little bit less about the content you produce and more about how you make people feel. So the one thing I knew when I left a client is I would say, like, I want you to feel like I think about your dollar the way I think about my own. And to me, I think that leading people with that sentiment. So when I was working with pizza shops and hair salons and small businesses, I believed that if I took care of their dollar more than anybody else would, who put their business before the client, then long-term I would win. And long-term I would have a lot of referrals. And long-term I would get to work with bigger and bigger companies. And that is completely played out. But the truth is that most times when a freelancer is like, man, I got my bills to pay this week, or I can take care of this client, the client's going to get effed. The client's going to get the short end of that stick, and the client's going to feel the short end of that stick. And when they do, they're not going to refer you out the way that my clients referred me out early, because they were like, man, like I called this kid at like 12 o'clock or emailed him at 12 o'clock. He emailed me back because he cared about the fact that, my website was down, and he got on the phone with me. And you're just like, that's the way you want people. You leave people that sentiment, they'll talk to other people about you. So my whole strategy was less about writing content, and it was more about taking care of the clients that I had so well that they would become my sales force.
Ooh, that's a great example. So one of the coaches of the No Pants Project has a really terrible website. I mean, it's beautiful. I should stop saying that, because the picture is like this gorgeous picture of an antique typewriter, and then it says, I write words that sell, and then it has an email address, but that's it. You can't click through anything. You can't see samples. There's nothing. And I talked to him about it. I'm like, so everybody's waiting to start their business until they get their website up, and yours is awful. And he said, I'm booked up. I'm on referrals, high dollar retainers, great clients. None of them come through the website. It's a placeholder in case I ever want to use my name.
It's interesting. Like, I think that it's crazy to hear somebody who does SEO say that ranking on Google for words like SEO company, SEO consultant, SEO agency was one of the worst things I ever did, because it led to a lot of leads that were, none of which were qualified, none of which were, I like really educated clients, because they start to understand your value better, right? Whereas when I wasn't getting those clients who were like, well, my cousin read a book on SEO. Like, they were like, no, I get it. Like, I'm referred in. You know what I'm saying? It's just like a different level of customer. Whereas when somebody Googles you, they're like, well, help me understand why I should pay you over just using my nephew who does web design.
So what do you say? Or what did you say when somebody says that? Or your multi-million-dollar version of that?
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think when people would say that to me, I tried to get off the phone as soon as humanly possible, because I realized that they didn't truly understand the value of working with somebody who had basically been doing SEO almost since it became an industry. It's like, if you're going to pit me up against, oh, well, I got this quote from this company in India or something, well, then you fundamentally don't understand the value that I might be able to provide to you, even if you're a small business. So for me, it was a flag to get off the call as soon as humanly possible.
So what did you do? Did you say, wow, thank you very much, let's keep in touch? How do you get out of that gracefully?
So, one thing that I do is I don't believe in anything in being a roadblock. So I always try to help people to advance and move whatever they're trying to move forward. So I'll never just say like, nope, sorry, tough shit, because that's not the kind of person I want to be. So what I would say is, hey, you know what? I don't think this is the right match for me and where I'm trying to go. But what I'll do is, when you get down to 2 companies, if you want to email me, and if I know something about one or the other, I'll tell you what I know about them, or I'll review the contract and let you know if there's any gotchas in there or any things that I would recommend you look at. So every single person I would be willing to help. And to this day, my BD team, to this day, they still spend 10 or 15 minutes with almost everybody who submits a lead, to say like, hey, let us talk to you about what you're trying to do and see if we can connect you to somebody who might be able to help. And if we can't do that, we have a form email that we respond back and say, here are 3 different companies that are run by our alumni. So there are people who were trusted and worked at SEER. We know how they work. They've been kind of indoctrinated in the way that we work. So therefore, if you're looking for a smaller version of SEER, here's 3 alumni that have started their own agencies that are growing great, and we trust them significantly. So we think that you should too.
And do they go with one of those 3, or do they go with the nephew who read this SEO book?
We don't always know. I'm like, hey, here you go. Here's some people that I would recommend. But I think most times people appreciate the fact that they go, great, if I'm not going to be able to get SEER and the level of power that SEER can bring, it'd be nice to get somebody who worked there for 3 or 4 or 5 years and is working with slightly smaller businesses.
Absolutely. So let's talk about understanding the value. As someone who's going into freelancing, especially the people who are looking at the decision, do I quit my day job? Do I go into this full time? What happens if I go into this full time and then suddenly the clients aren't there, or if I lose a big client? How do you maintain the mindset of, I know my value, I'm not going to sell myself short, especially when you've got the bills to pay?
Ooh, a couple things. I started off selling myself very short. I think there's a little bit of a gift and a curse of loving what you do. Is when you love what you do, you find yourself sometimes not leading in with what your cost is, but more like, would this be a cool client to work on? Would this be a cool person to help out? Do I think I can help them? Which I think is an advantage, because people feel that. Versus if it's just always about like, it's got to be at least this much, no dice. So early on, I had to have other people telling me, you're charging way too little. Because it wasn't
The
about
clients told you that?
partners did. So partners were like, I'm marking you up 50% because like you're undercharging so much. So you need to start charging me a little bit more because you won't be around, or this can't be sustainable for you. And I didn't know any difference. So having partners tell you like, I'm marking you up 50%, dude, like that's too much for me. Most of my partners, I can only mark up 10 or 15%, but because you're charging so little, but adding so much value to my clients, I'm marking that up because I know the value that they're getting. And to have somebody say that to you, I think, was very helpful early on for me to realize the value that I was driving, because I just felt lucky that I got a chance to do something I really enjoyed doing every day, and that I was making enough to pay the bills. But sometimes there was a little bit of a mismatch or a disconnect in what I was charging early on.
Well, and you didn't have kids then.
Nope.
So it was just you, right? You
Yep,
weren't
it
even
was,
married at that point?
wasn't married. It was just me. So I think the one thing that people need to be honest with themselves about is you need to have if I don't hit this by this point, I'm done. Because you can always read another book about somebody who almost quit and pivoted and created Instagram, right? It's like, oh, they started off building this, and because they didn't quit, like they made Instagram, and now there are 16 people who got their company bought for $100 billion or whatever, right? And you just, like, you're always going to, there is an oversupply of stories like that. So you will always be able to read some story where somebody almost quit when the numbers looked horrible and they kept going. That's because nobody wants to hear from the tens of thousands of people who ruined their marriages, ruined their relationships, weren't there for their kids, like weren't there for people in their family when they needed them, because nobody wants to hear that story. But yet that is the typical story. I tried, I failed, and now I got a job at Microsoft, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But nobody really wants to talk about that. So therefore, you just keep getting bombarded by all these like inspirational stories of people who almost quit. So I think it's important when you start to say, if I don't hit this by this point, I'm going to have a conversation with myself, and I might choose to go past that, but I know that I'm now choosing to go past the point that I told myself I wouldn't.
You were the first person that has ever said it that way. That's brilliant.
Well, because
So,
you have to have that. Otherwise, you'll just keep dangling on to the inspirational post from Gary Vaynerchuk or something, right? Like there's an oversupply of inspiration. And if you if you just want a little crack or a peek into something that makes you hang on for another week to maybe close that deal, you will find it. And then every week you find a new one, and the next thing you know, it's 2 years later, and now you're in real trouble.
I know of a couple of people who have tried for freelancing and for various reasons couldn't make it work, and have taken jobs and sort of feel guilty that they haven't made their freelancing work. And I'm like, listen, you've got kids. You need to take care of your family, your kids. You need health insurance for those little tiny people, and you need to feed them so they will get to be bigger people. And some of these things, it's great to have the inspiration, but you've also got to counter it with a little dose of reality.
It's hard too. Like,
Yeah.
like, what if you don't get paid by a client who stretches you out forever, right? And they just don't pay. Oh, we'll get you in a month. Oh, we'll get you in 2 months. We'll get you in 3 months. The stress of that. Whereas when you go to Microsoft every day, you go in at 9, you leave at 6:30. Maybe once in a while your boss sends an email over the weekend. Ooh, but it's like, oh man, it's hard. It's hard, and it's thankless, and you're going to do all that hard work, and most of us are going to fail at it. And to me, there is no shame. If anything, sometimes those are the freaking smart people. The people who are like, you know what? I can go out in the marketplace and make 125 a year. I've been freelancing and making, 40 or 50, and getting all these people telling me I'm an entrepreneur and a job creator and making me feel good about myself. But that's not paying the freaking bills. And all that stress, when you stop posting stuff on LinkedIn about how you're crushing it, when you're looking at your bills, are you recording yourself looking at your bills at the kitchen table with your hand over your head, trying to figure out how you're going to move the shell game around? No, that's never on LinkedIn. But that's the reality for a lot of freaking freelancers. So to me, there's nothing if anything, I love hiring people who at some point ran something because they know what it's like. They know the pressures and stresses that I'm under and the pushes and the pulls of, yeah, I want to get this great set of benefits, but then that means I can't give raises the way I want this year. Like somebody who actually understands that push and pull, so much more valuable as an executive than someone who's knocking on your door like, why can't we do everything? Why can't we do this and this and that? And well, the company made all this money last year, so why don't we just do this? You're like, because the year before we made nothing. Right? So I'll get off my high horse there, but I swear it's like I'm just so sick of the oversupply of inspiration.
Well, I think that as a culture and especially as a country, it's the pull yourself up by your bootstraps, the Trek West, it's the Horatio Alger story. I mean, it's endemic in the culture. If you have enough faith or if you have enough passion or like all of the advice, oh, follow your passion. Well, that's dumb.
Follow your passion.
Follow your passion, but
the only people who say that are people who followed their passions and it made them rich.
Right.
Right? Yeah. Like no one who followed their passions and got crushed and is now under a mountain of debt following their passion that ever talks, right? Mm-hmm. It's the people who followed their passion and turned out rich or are looking rich at least on social media that tell you to do that. One of my advisors once said to me, because when we didn't have titles in the company for a long time, and he's like, the only person in the company who doesn't care about titles is the person who founded it. He's like, you got to smack yourself out of that BS, Will. He's like, because you think that these things are good, but you're the founder and everybody knows it. He's like, it's different.
So I got to tell you, David Price said he needed this insight 5 years ago, hell, 10 years ago. I'm telling you, people, Will Reynolds, you tell the full story, the real story. You get down and dirty. So let's talk, for the people that are just joining us, we are talking with Will Reynolds. He is the founder, CEO of SEER, and just absolutely brilliant. It's a wide-ranging conversation about starting a business, being a founder, being a freelancer, some real insight into what it takes to be in business for yourself and then work with other people. One of the things that people are most nervous about is, what if my client doesn't extend a contract? I'm going through that right now. What happened if a client doesn't extend? And especially after they've passed the deadline to say whether or not they're going to extend, right? I'm like, okay, so you're probably not, but maybe you will, and and so you got that. Or someone comes to you and says, nah, not working, we don't want you, and then a chunk of income is gone, or you fire a client. The bottom line of all three is money that you perhaps were counting on is not going to be there. So talk about all three.
Oh, this is why you don't spend everything you make. Right. I am a big believer in running a profitable business and having it be profitable enough that I can save a lot of money on the side, because it gives you more leverage in those moments. It makes you, like I always said, I never want to wake up in the morning and be some client's bitch. I never want them to be able to feel like we're big enough that we can always treat you how we want. We can ask for outlandish stuff that's completely off the rails, because what are you going to fire me? Right? So for me, I never wanted a client to be over 12% of my total rev, period, ever. Okay. Because for me, whenever that happened, I never celebrated it. So if we landed a big client, if they got over 12% of our revenue, I was immediately like, we don't celebrate that until we find somebody to dilute them down to less than 12%. That's when we'll celebrate. Because otherwise, what we've just done is we've signed on a client, and they're now in a position where they can force my hand on things that I almost have to accept. So I don't like that. So for me, create some kind of level of, I do not want to have a client over this, which might mean you might need to turn some business away. Sorry. That's just the way it is. If you want to take it all on, when those big clients come, then you better hope to God they're profitable and that you stored a lot of that profit. That's another thing. A lot of times those big clients aren't even profitable when you really look at them, because they take up all your time. and they have a lot of mandates on your time. So that's one thing I would say on that. The second thing on letting a client go is you've got to have some kind of value system that helps you to understand when something's bigger than money. Um, and as you grow, if you're one person, two people, whatever, um, your team will be looking at you like, all right, well, all that stuff that you say about like, how we believe about clients, when they start treating us in a certain way or doing things that are unfair, um, do you just suck it up? Or do you say, we're going to let this client go over time. Help me go find a new client to replace that client's revenue with. Because the one mistake that I used to make is, especially when I was really small, is I would go around and be like, we don't need to put up with this crap, And what I trained my team members to think is that they didn't have to put up with that crap either. And it was like, and my president, Crystal, who runs the business now, because I'm not good at it, she said to me early on, she said, you got to stop saying that, Will, because what you're training people to do is to go, we're not going to put up with this, or we don't need to put up with this. And they would bring that to you thinking that you were going to go out and get a new client. She said, you need to tell people that when they're frustrated by their current client and they think that that's something they shouldn't have to put up with, they should go get a client to replace the revenue, because none of them are saying we shouldn't have to put up with this and you can cut my paycheck in half for the next 6 months while we go get a new client. They're saying we don't want to put up with this, and I expect my raise, and I expect my benefits, and I expect all that, and I expect you to go get me a new client to work on. Like, just go poof, just get one, because clients are easy to get. And it was so insightful to have Crystal say that to me, because it changed the way that I talked in the company after that. Is our belief system hasn't changed, but it's like, if you don't like the client you're working on, well, what are you doing to help me get another one? Nothing? Oh, so it's now my job. So now I got to fly all over the world and try to get another client because you don't like this client. So now I got to spend time away from my family for that. And you're going to do nothing to help in that process. And it's important to remind people that, clients don't just grow off of trees. So it's a really important balance to strike between those two. And I've made the mistake of kind of being a little too, because I know I can get another client. They can't, right? So, Crystal was like, be careful what you say, because I'm starting to hear drips of people saying, well, we shouldn't have to do this, or we shouldn't have to put up with that. And she's like, that's coming from you, buddy. You're the one putting that out in the company. And those people just think that you're going to go work your tail off. And I was like, oh, you're right. They're going to expect you to stay up till 2 a.m. trying to get proposals out the door to close those deals. They're not staying up till 2 a.m. with you to help replace that client that they didn't want to work with.
Mm-hmm. So I'm shocked to hear you say, I'm not good at running the business. What?
We wouldn't even be here if I was still running the business. We wouldn't even be having this conversation.
So kind of talk to us about Crystal. And I did. I was wondering, why are you the director of digital strategy? I mean,
because that's what I'm good at. I'm not good at
CEO, and what?
I'm not good at running the business. Like, that is the truth. Here's an example of how bad I am at running the business. When we were really small, before the days of Instacart and all that stuff, I would take orders from people and go to the supermarket after work and pick up all the different drinks they wanted in the fridge. So, you work a full day, you leave at 8 o'clock, and then you go to the supermarket and you're there for an hour putting stuff in the cart and bringing it in. And after I hired a controller, he said to me, Will, do you know how much you spent on Red Bull this year? I went, no. We were small. He's like, you spent almost $3,000 on freaking Red Bull this year, and only 5 people in the company drink it. And I was like, oh, and he's like, yeah, man. He's like, I found that in a week. He's like, I can't imagine what you're spending money on, because I don't get up. That's another, it's interesting. It's really freeing when you don't wake up in the morning to look at the spreadsheet. You have to. I always had to early. But once you can get to the point where you don't have to look at the spreadsheets, I get to work on client services, making clients feel like that they got good value for their investment, talking to my future leaders, trying to remove the roadblocks for them. That is the most fun part of my job. You get me in something where I got to look at gross profit and revenue per head count. It's like my energy starts to drain, and I start wanting to go help a client solve a problem, or go find a new way to innovate, or talk to a team member over coffee about what's going on with them and how I can help them. So I wouldn't pay attention to those things like I should. And as a result, we had some really crazy expenditures. We had set up things like bonus programs that didn't scale for more than like 12 months because I would build it and then they'd be like, next year you're going to basically take 50% of your profit and just give it away to people who have been in your company for a year. And I was like, I didn't think through how that would scale. I didn't think we'd get this big. So like, I'm not good at running the company. Don't enjoy it. I don't think it's fun. I get zero pleasure out of it. I get a lot of pleasure out of seeing where we got to, but we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for my executive team because they helped to protect me from the things that really kind of drain my energy that could really hurt the whole business.
That is, what's the name of the book? The E-Myth. E-Myth
Yes.
and E-Myth Revisited. And those two books were so helpful because it said, listen, you start, and I think the example was like a pie company. You start a pie company because you love baking pies. And then the next thing you know, you're no longer baking pies, but you're doing all of this other stuff that has nothing to do with the reason why you started the business. So
Yep.
how quickly do people begin to put in their small version of the executive team?
Your first step is have an advisory board. So when I was just me and one other person, I had a 4-person advisory board. And that was because somebody told me to do it. They were like, you're a good kid. You're going to f this company up because you're just naive. They were like, you don't know. And nobody said it to me in a rude way. They said it to me in a way they were like, oh my God, like we don't want to see a guy like you not have a chance to see your full potential because you didn't know how to manage your finances. So my first advisory board was one financial person, one marketing guy, a lawyer, and a sales guy. And I would take them out to dinner every quarter. That's all they asked for. Real people who want to help you in your business. Don't ask for equity to start off, especially when you're small, in my opinion. So they just helped me with no profit motive. They didn't want to see me mess up something. They were like, you're a really good guy who's really good at what you do, but you don't have the acumen around certain things, around how much you should charge, what the value your clients are seeing, how to get around the client not calling you back, but has passed the renewal. I got trained on that by my sales coach.
How do you do it?
Stuff like that.
What do you do?
Quite simply, this is what you say. So let's say you and I are working together and we're 3 months into the project and it's a 6-month project. I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to call you. I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to say, you probably wouldn't want to work with me if I stopped returning your calls, would you? Can you imagine how it would feel if we had an agreement that said that I would get back in touch with you within whatever time frame, and when that time frame came, I didn't do it, and then when you called me the next day and the next day and the next day, I never returned your calls, how would you feel about me as a partner? And they go, oh, I hate that about partners and consultants and blah, 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 blah. And you go, right. So let's agree to hold each other to that same account because this is a two-way street. So as long as I am getting back to you when I said I would, then will you do the same? And then you say, so my renewal will start at month 5. If the news is bad, that's okay. It's important to give somebody an easy out. You're doing me a favor in month 5 by saying I'm not going to renew in month 6. Then to think, I really liked you, Will, so I want to try to find a way, but deep down, you know you can't afford it, or I didn't make you enough profit back. So it's like, then I'm holding on. So what happens is at month 5, you give them the call and you say, remember when we had that conversation about how I would fulfill and be there when you asked me to be there, and I would always get back to you in X time? Did I live up to that end of the bargain? They go, oh, yeah, you did. You go, great. Well, when we talked, remember I told you that at 5 months of our project, I would check in with you and ask you to do the same. That's what I'm asking for today. Can you tell me within the next 2 days if you believe you're going to be in a position to renew? And if not, it's all good. But I fulfilled my end of the bargain, and you said you wouldn't want to work with somebody who didn't do that, and I wouldn't want to work with a client who didn't do that as well back to me. And that guilt and them agreeing to it 3 months earlier is what makes them more likely psychologically to tell you, okay, all right, we're not going to pick you, because you force them to say yes, that they would be straight up with you in a very clear way, and you reminded them that you are holding yourself to the same standard that you want them to hold themselves to. And I think that is what my sales coach taught me, which helped me to get through so many of those issues. Because I got a heads up way before those contracts were past due 2 months and the person just didn't return my call. Because eventually that person's going to say no. So the earlier I can find that out, the better. My sales coach was awesome.
That helps a lot because it's also like energy. The energy is sticky
Mm.
because you can't move on. Or if you move on, what do you do if you move on and then they come back and they say, no, I do want to extend. I just assumed that you would. Then it's, it's sticky.
Well, because you know what you also get to say? You get to say, that's not the relationship that I thought that we had. I thought the relationship that we had was I deliver when I say I was. Did I ever come in late on the deliverable? Did I ever not show up to a call? Did I ever not return your phone call? No? Okay. Then I thought we were equals. That's the problem is too often contractors, you lose, it's another thing, my sales coach was amazing. You lose leverage when you act and sound like somebody who needs that check, right? So the minute it's I need you, the client's like, oh, you need me. Like I'm going to use that to my advantage, right? Even if they're not doing it intentionally, I think it's just human nature in some ways to be like, oh, this person's kind of needy. Like I can get away with anything. And I think that when you say, look, I'm not going to renew this contract. We had an agreement on how we were going to work together. I lived up to my end of the bargain. You didn't. Sometimes they'll go, I'll wait 2 or 3 months. I know I was late. Oh, okay. But let's not do this to each other again. Okay. So you know what? I'm willing to look at way at this time. Now, if I slip on my side of the bargain, then I didn't live up to my side and you have every right. But you said that I lived up to my end of the bargain and I did the things I said I was going to do when I said I was going to do them. So like, let's just be adults here and let's treat each other with a certain amount of mutual respect.
Wonderful. So where did you find your advisory board? And you mentioned that it was like out to dinner. So where did you find these people that were willing to give you, in effect, private coaching, especially as you were just starting out? Did you do a trade with them? Did you know them already? Like, how do you find them?
Like most of this business, got freaking lucky.
Oh,
So I think the only thing that I do well is, but it's big, is I make it easy to do the right thing in the company. That's it. I feel like there's so much tension when there's the reason why tension occurs very often is because you know the right thing to do, but you're unwilling to do it because of what it's going to do to your finances or whatever, right? So I try really hard to make it easy for people to do the right thing at SEER. That's like I think that's my value, right? Because a lot of this has been luck. So one of my fraternity brothers, Tim Gillen, he was like, I got this professor at Penn who is like really good with like entrepreneurship and whatnot. And he's like, it looks like you're actually like got a couple of employees now. He's like, this isn't just you just doing your own thing on the side. I'm like, no, it's not. He's like, I think you guys should meet. He's really interested in working with entrepreneurs in the inner city or something like that. So I said, okay. So I met John Mason, who was in banking and finance. And I met him for a coffee. And he was like, you should get together an advisory board. And I'm like, oh, what? I'm like, what is that? Tell me about it. And he's like, oh my God. So then he goes, all right, I know some people for whom I should introduce you to. And let's go out to lunch with them together. So he would go out to lunch with me, with them. And literally to this day, John Mason has never asked me for a dime. He's never asked me for anything. So I feel like I got lucky in the sense of one of my fraternity brothers connected me to a really good guy who didn't have a profit motive for himself. His motive, there was a purity in his motive. He just really liked seeing people that were growing businesses in the city and were young and were trying to do the right things, not make mistakes that could put them out of business before they reach their potential. And that was how he got fulfilled. So it wasn't about equity. It wasn't about paying me for my time. It was like, how can I assemble a group of people? So then after he got me one other person, he went, do you have anybody else in your group like this? Because it's another area where I see that you might need some help, but I'm not your guy. And in doing all that, I started emailing people and be like, hey, like, I think I need some help here. And a lot of these people were people I had done favors for in the past because I didn't want to be a roadblock. So when they came to me looking for something, I helped them. So what happens is when I come to them looking for something, they almost feel like they owed me to put that time in. So yeah, that's how I built my advisory board. And the other thing that John Mason said to me, that I thought was very important, because nobody said this to me, but he said, Will, the advisory board that gets you from point A to point B is not likely to be the same advisory group to get you from B to C. And he said, it's okay if you outgrow me. He said, don't leave me around out of loyalty because I know you're a good guy if you don't think I add any more value. Because he's like, because you're going to be taking my time from somebody else that I could be helping. And I was like, John, I would never. And he's like, no, I actually want you to. And I was like, okay, I understand. So at some point, I was like, John, I think that, I got a controller now, and I got a couple of accountants, and I guess and we had started to outgrow his ability to help us because we had gotten bigger than anything he had ever seen at that point. So once in a while, I mean, John's really old now. I shouldn't say it that way, but I think John's like 83 now, and we meet for lunch once a year if we can, and talk about his grandkids and my kids. He's seen me grow up, but that all came from him just trying to help me out.
So how did Professor Mason react when you got on the Fortune 100 list of urban businesses that were actually making a difference?
We've been on that list 6 years in a row. John has an extreme amount of pride. There are some people who saw what I was doing early, and they saw more in me than I saw in myself. Not to sound all like that, but I was just like, oh, I'm just kicking around. I love my job. I love the people I get to do it with. And I think he was like, I'm going to put my time into this kid because I think he's got a chance to have a bigger impact than he even realizes. And I mean, when we get together, I think he's just still like, man, who knew that little bit of time that I put into this kid would turn into a company that's on the trajectory that it is.
Do you think that's one of the reasons why you are adamant about giving back?
No, not that. No. I am adamant about giving back because selfishly it keeps me grounded. I think that one of the most dangerous places you can be as an entrepreneur is hanging out with a bunch of other entrepreneurs, because your problems become relative. So I remember once I was at a bar in Munich, and one of my friends had raised, a $20 million round or so, and another friend had tripled the business over 2 years, and I had only doubled in 2 years or whatever it was, or increased by 80%. And in that moment, I felt a little man, I thought I was doing great, but man, he's raising all this money, he's getting investors, she's doing this. And then I was like, ooh, you know what? I don't want to hang out with a bunch of entrepreneurs, because you start not realizing, sometimes when you're doing really well, you start thinking you're not, because you're comparing yourself to other people. And for me, that volunteer time, that time when I hear about people's real struggles and what they're going through, I think it helps me to build up some armor against believing that I'm having a tough day. I've started to, whenever I have a tough day, I've started to, when I walk home, ask myself, did I walk by, of all the people I walk by today, how many of them would trade places with me with the problems that I had today? And whenever I have a bad day, quote unquote, asking myself that question for 2 seconds and walking through my city gets me out of my head really fast, because my problems a lot of people would love to have.
That's a beautiful way to end this. This doesn't get any better than that. Will Reynolds, Sear Interactive, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
I have just been fangirling on you for a while. So for fairly selfish reasons, this is just awesome. And your heart is as big as your business.
I hope so. I keep trying to do the right thing.
That's all any of us is asked for. Thank you for joining us for the No Pants Show, and thank you to all of you for supporting the No Pants Show. We will see you again next time. Take care. Bye.
Adios.